The row between Washington, D.C. and Beijing over the Chinese spy balloon, some call it Balloon Gate, has sent relations between the two countries into a tailspin. The balloon spent 5 days crossing the United States before it was shot down off the coast of South Carolina near Myrtle Beach by a U.S. Air Force jet. Now, ahead of the balloon incident, China had been attempting to improve ties with the U.S. The U.S. Navy has retrieved some of the wreckage of the balloon from the ocean off the coast of South Carolina. Beijing says, however, it wants its balloon back. But Washington says it plans to have it examined by the Secret Service. And predictably, the row between Washington and Beijing over the balloon has spilled over into domestic politics in the U.S. Capitol. Take a listen.
I applaud President Biden for his leadership. I applaud that he listened to the military and national security experts. And I think as we go forward in time, everyone's going to see what he did was the right thing. We hope our Republican colleagues will avoid the politics.
A balloon flies over the United States collecting data over every military base in America, and the president just sits by. Says he gave the order on Wednesday to shoot it down, but it didn't get shot down on Saturday. Did he send it through the mail service?
I'm joined now by Kelly Grieco. She's a senior fellow at the Stimson Center think tank, where she is an expert on U.S. foreign and defense policy. It's good to have you on the program. So let me get your grade on relations between the U.S. and China now, post-shooting down of this balloon.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. This is certainly a very unfortunate incident, particularly the timing, as it happened right before Secretary Blinken was to travel to Beijing for discussions that would have hopefully helped to calm down sort of spiraling tensions between the United States and China. That's obviously not happening now. The trip's been canceled. And I think there's a real danger that this incident will crystallize for many people the threat that China poses, and will use this event as sort of another reason to sort of adopt a much more hawkish approach.
Yeah, Senator Schumer says that President Biden is looking at other actions that he can take after shooting down this balloon. I mean, what would those actions be?
Yes, it's hard to imagine what they would be, quite frankly. I would imagine there are probably not military actions as much as they might be some kind of, financial or economic sanctions or something of that type. I think the real danger here is overreaction. Of course, what China did is outrageous, and clearly the United States needed to respond, and I think shooting the balloon down was the appropriate thing to do. But these kinds of incidents are likely to happen when you are competing against another great power, and that's explicitly your approach is, what we call here in Washington, great power competition. Mm-hmm. Early in the Cold War, we saw these kinds of incidents happen. For example, the U-2 plane that was shot down over the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And one of the dangers, I think, for U.S.-China relations today is that we're in an early period in the relationship in terms of competition, and that we don't really have a lot of rules of the road and the kinds of communication between the capitals to help to really stabilize relations.
Yeah, do we need something like a hotline between Beijing and Washington? And I know it's not really comparable to the Soviet Union and the U.S. Because we're talking about the world's two largest economies now that are intertwined with each other. At the same time, there are two military powers that appear to be headed towards a possible conflict.
Yes, I think that's absolutely the case. We need better communications, more regular communications. And I think we also need what is called confidence building measures. Some type of high level discussions where we actually talk about the things that we are going to consider appropriate military activities and those that are not, and what kind of limits to place, sort of things that we would both mutually agree would be things that we don't want either party to do, just to try to stabilize this, because there is a real danger that, either an accident or some kind of, inadvertent escalation like this could lead to a really serious crisis and spiral very quickly out of control.
In terms of China's motivation for sending a balloon over the United States, I mean, why would it do that? You pointed out on Twitter that this bears a resemblance to Russia's tactic of trying to gain air superiority over Ukraine by using relatively inexpensive methods such as drones and missiles. Do you think Beijing is trying the same tactic here?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's been so lost in this conversation is, to me, one of the warnings of this incident, and that the United States, we tend to focus on trying to control the airspace between about 15,000 feet and 60,000 feet, where high-end fighters and bombers operate, and using, traditional aircraft that are piloted in that way. What we see here is sort of similar to the way Russia's using the loitering munitions and missiles, and that kind of going around, if you will, outflanking the sort of blue skies, that airspace I talked about, and using the really high altitude airspace to actually transit, perhaps not be detected. It's much harder to detect. And even if they are detected, then, in order, they're engaging our radars. The cost exchange ratio is really favorable for a balloon compared to an air defense missile or an air-to-air missile like the one that we used to shoot this down.